Okay, fifth graders. So this next lesson we're doing is chapter 9, lesson 7, which is subtracting unlike fractions. So the last one you did with me was adding unlike fractions. So the only difference today is instead of adding the numerators, we will be subtracting them. But we're going to see in our lesson today that the process of getting there is the same, except for at the end, instead of adding, we simply subtract those numerators. Other than that, the steps in the process are the same thing we did with lesson 5. So just a reminder, we're subtracting unlike fractions, and like I just said, subtracting unlike fractions is similar to adding unlike fractions. So we're going to use all those tools we used for lesson 5 in today's lesson. Okay, so example 1. A female Cuban tree frog can be up to 5/12 foot long. A male Cuban tree frog can be up to 1/4 of a foot long. How much longer is the female Cuban tree frog than the male? So remember, this key here is when we're comparing how much longer, that's what tells us we're going to subtract here. So we're taking 5/12 and subtracting 1/4 to see how much longer that female Cuban tree frog is. Okay, so the same process we did with adding, where we take our denominators of 12 and 4, and we find the lowest common multiple. So because this example is already done for you, I'm just going to explain it. So they want us to write equivalent fractions, which are like fractions, using the least common denominator, LCD. So they found, when they did the LCD, they found their multiples, and they found that the lowest one was 12. Which means our new denominator here is 12. Now, like we did with adding fractions, 12 on 5/12, the 12 and the 12 stay the same, which means 5 can stay the same. Okay, or you can ask yourself, we did this in the last one, 12 times 1 equals 12, so 5 times 1 equals 12. Okay, but 4, we went from 4 to 12, so that one did not stay the same. And you can see here, 4 times 3 gave them that 12, which means they had to do 1 times 3 gave them 3. So now, instead of 1/4, we've made an equivalent fraction of 3/12. That's an equivalent fraction to that 1/4 we had. So now all we do is we take 5, and remember, we're subtracting in this lesson, so we do 5 take away 3, which is 2/12. Okay, and then I'm going to point out one thing, because we had a lesson on simplifying. You do need to always make sure that you can simplify. 2/12, boys and girls, the simplest way to see if we can simplify this one is to look. 2 and 12 are both even numbers. Even numbers can always be simplified by dividing them by what? 2. All even numbers can be divided by 2. So when you have 2 even numbers, that means they can both be divided by 2. So 2 divided by 2 gives me 1, and 12 divided by 2 gives me 6. So 2/12 was not the wrong answer, but if you got that as your final answer, you just weren't done. You had to simplify. It's a very important thing you need to know how to do in math, is how to simplify. So we divided them both by 2 and ended up with 1/6 as our final answer. Okay, let's look at our next example here. Okay, so our guided practice today, it says subtract, and as always, you see the word here again, write in simplest form. We need to simplify if we can. Okay, so remember, the only difference, boys and girls, is this subtraction sign. Other than the subtraction sign, we are doing the same process as we did for adding. So I'm going to take my denominators of 8 and 4, and I'm going to find my least common multiple, or my lowest common denominator is what it's going to end up being. So I'm going to count 8. I'm going to go a little further, even though some of you may know, no, Ms. Contreras, you don't have to go to 16. But I just want to show you that you do need to list your multiples. Oh, and you guys are right. I can simply see that 8 is my lowest common multiple there, which means that 8 is going to be my lowest common denominator here. So I have 8 and 8 on there. Okay, so if I look over here, 3/8. Well, that one stayed the same as 8, which means the 3 can stay the same. So 3/8 is going to stay 3/8. And then for my 4 here, what do I multiply 4 by to get to 8? I need to multiply it by 2, which means I multiply the top by 2. So 1 times 2, my new numerator there is 2. So reminder, we're subtracting on this one, and we only subtract our numerators, not our denominators. So 3 take away 2 gives me 1. And my denominator stays the same at 8. So my answer on this one ends up being 1/8. And I cannot simplify this one because whenever I have a 1 as my numerator, I can't divide anything other than 1 by 1. So that is a simplified answer of 1/8. Okay, let's see what our next problems look like. Okay, and I'm going to point it out again to you that all of these directions on all the things we're doing say write in simplest form, telling you you need to simplify if you can. Okay, so we're subtracting. We need to take our 6 and our 2. So 6 and 2 are my denominators here. So let's do 6. I'm going to go a little bit further than I probably need to. 6, 12, 18. Pretty sure that's plenty far enough. So now let's look at 2. Count by 2s. 2, 4. Oh, and I know I can stop at 6 because I see right there 6 and 6. So my new denominator is 6 for both fractions. So now we got to find those equivalent fractions. So 6 to 6, that did not change, which means my 5 does not change. So this one stays 5, 6. But 2 to 6, that did change. And I need to ask myself, how did I get from 2 to 6? I multiplied by 3. So I'm going to do 1 times 3 there. 1 times 3 is 3. I subtract my numerators. 5 take away 3 equals 2. My denominator stays the same as 6. Now, key thing here, simplest form. And just like the last problem we did, 2 and 6 are both what kind of numbers, boys and girls? Yes, they are both even, which means they can both be divided by 2. Divide. Whatever I do to the top, I have to do the bottom. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do the top. So 2 divided by 2 gives me 1. 6 divided by 2 gives me 3. So my final simplified answer is 1/3 on that one. Okay, let's look over here at number 4. 5 and 6. Okay. That's an even and an odd number. So this one we're going to have to look at closely. Okay. Count by 5s if you know it. 5, 10, 15, 20. I have to go pretty far on this one. 25. Because I know right now none of those numbers go into 30. I mean 6 and 30. Okay. Now I'm going to count by 6s. 6. 12, 18, 24. So it's taking a little bit longer. I got to list as many multiples as I need to get to that lowest common multiple. Oh, and I found it. There it is. It is 30. So that means 30 is going to be the new denominator. So I have 30 and 30, but now I need to make my equivalent fractions. I cannot just take the 4 and put it here. I cannot take that 4 because 5 changed. That means 4 has to change. So what times 5 gives me 30? 5 times 6, which means we've got to do 4 times 6. And 4 times 6 is 24. Okay, 6 times what gets me my 30? It's 6 times 5. So that means I got to do 1 times 5. 1 times 5 gets me 5. Okay, so I have my new equivalent fractions. Now my last step is all I need to do is subtract 24, take away 5. 30 is going to stay the same because remember when we are adding or subtracting, the denominator, once we get that lowest common denominator, stays the same. We do not subtract or add it. 24 take away 5 though would give me 19. And now I have to think, can I put this into simplest form? Nope, and I know that because 19 is a prime number. Prime numbers cannot be simplified. So my final answer ends up being 19/30. Okay, we have 2 more problems to go over. And then you guys will be able to get started. Okay, so on this one, it's our algebra, finding the unknown. Reminder, we saw this with adding fractions. We have our variables here. When we see the letters, those are called variables. Those are our unknown numbers. Okay. So M is asking for the entire problem here. So we're just going to solve it like regular. So I'm going to take my denominators, which are 6 and 4. And we are going to find the multiples for 6 and 4. Okay, 6, I have 6, 12, I'm gonna go a little further than I have to. 18. Now let's do 4. 4, 8, oh, 12. Okay, I didn't even have to go to 18. Got 12 right there, so 12 ends up being our lowest common denominator there. So 12 and 12. We found the LCD by finding our multiples here. Remember that. We got to find our multiples in order to find our new denominator. Okay, so now I need to ask myself, 6 times what gets me 12? Well, I should know 6 times 2, which means I need to do 5 times 2, and 5 times 2 gets me 10. So my equivalent fraction for 5/6 is 10/12. And then I want to do 4 times what gets me 12? That is 4 times 3. Since I do 4 times 3, I also need to do 3 times 3, which gives me 9. So on this one, 12 is my denominator because it does stay the same, but then all I need to do, 10 take away 9 gives me 1. So I end up with, and again, when I have 1 as my numerator, I can't simplify it, so I end up with 1/12. That is the answer for M. Okay, I'm going to show you a trick on this last problem. So you guys can see in the answer, we're only looking for N, and N only represents the numerator of this problem. So that's going to help us out a little bit. We can see here, their new denominator was 15, which means that's what we're going to end up needing to get to. So all I have to do here is ask myself, 3 times what gets me 15? 3 times 5. So that means on the top here, I'm going to write it down here, this new fraction is going to be 10/15. And then I need to do the same thing to 3/5. 5 times what gets me 15? 3. 3. So that means this new equivalent fraction to 3/5 is 9/15. Okay, so now all I have to do is subtract my numerators. 10 take away 9 gives me 1. They're not asking for the whole thing. You can see, remember, N represents just the numerator, so they're only asking us for the numerator. So what does N equal? N equals 1. Okay, so remember when you have these algebra problems and they're asking for a specific part, we can use tricks like this so that we don't have to solve the entire thing. They give you some of the tools you need so that you can solve it with this use of strategy, okay? So go ahead, and if you need to watch the video again, make sure you rewatch it. Otherwise, go ahead and go complete your assignments for subtracting unlike fractions. If you have any questions, make sure you reach out to your teacher. I'll see you for the next video.